Hello and welcome to Northwest Newsweek. Fort Frances OPP have laid murder charges against a Big Grassy River man in connection with the death of a young woman last month. 23-year-old Danielle Big George from Big Island First Nation was found dead on the reserve on August 30th. 26-year-old Stacey Commigan was charged soon after with committing an indignity to a dead body. But after a post-mortem in Toronto, he's now been charged with first-degree murder as well. He was arrested in Winnipeg on Tuesday and transported back to Fort Frances, where he appeared in court and remains in custody. Sparks flew in Ignace last Sunday as residents and council got into a heated debate over the planned removal of the town's Granite Gateway signs. A special meeting of council was held to discuss Ignace's new branding initiative and hear a petition from opponents who are passionate over preserving the town's history. Adam Riley reports.
It was a packed house at a special meeting of council in Ignace. Residents, council and administration gathered to discuss the future of the rocks, which mark the east and west entrances to the town. It came after talk of removal of the granite signs circulated in the community shortly after the recent town rebranding was announced in June. Leading the charge against the removal is longtime resident and former town planner Jeff Lederer. He wants the rocks to stay where they are, and he's collected over 200 names on a petition to back up his argument.
I thought it would be more about what is the importance of these kind of gateways to the community residents, and should they be relocated or not? And that's where I thought the discussion would go in terms of that, and give reasons why they should and why they shouldn't.
However, that is not how the meeting went. Discussions became heated, and it soon devolved into a free-for-all.
You have already decided to remove those rocks.
No, we haven't. Listen what I'm saying.
I thought we were coming to meet with council. I didn't want to get shoved in the middle of all of this. And I don't have time to be shoved in the middle of all of it.
The community's will to have the monuments stay where they are.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Who is in the chair, Mr. Chairman?
Things became so heated near the midway point of the meeting, residents began leaving en masse, including Councillor John Taddeo. Tom Graham is with TD Graham and Associates, who helped coordinate the rebrand. He reiterates there hasn't been any final decision as to the future of the signs.
The rocks, which are obviously part of Ignace's history, we respect that. We have a lot of respect for things historical, and what we recommended was to try and find a way to honor that heritage.
Mayor Lee Kennard feels the entire issue is a case of lost in translation, adding discussions about the signs were held months ago during consultations.
The gateway signs were up on the board, and it was discussed whether to move them, get rid of them, or what. And nobody had an opinion. Not one soul says no until the final plan, when it became reality.
Kennard says the final decision on what will happen to the signs will be decided upon by the next council, which is due to be elected next month. Adam Riley, TBT News.
Council in Greenstone has taken the unusual step of removing a member from its council table. Under the Municipal Act, any councillor who has not attended a meeting for 3 consecutive months must have their seat declared vacant. That's what happened on Monday's meeting at Beardmore. Council voted against a motion put forward by Rural West Councillor Andre Blanchard for a leave of absence. The decision means his seat will be vacant until next month's election, according to Greenstone Mayor Ron Beaulieu.
The councillor did write a letter requesting this from members of council, and the motion was denied, so which means that council did not approve his absentee at the council table for the 3 months after 3 months, and now there's I guess we'll be dealing with this through the clerk.
However, Blanchard will not be gone for long and will return to council table in December, as no one chose to run against him in the October municipal election. Dryden's Integrity Commissioner has dismissed a pair of complaints that were leveled against 5 members of City Council. In April, it was alleged councillors Nick Bayak, John Carlucci, Martin McKinnon, Norm Bush, and Mayor Greg Wilson breached several provisions of the Code of Conduct in their decisions around the fire service. It's alleged the 5 members engaged in collusion, bullying, intimidation, and harassment, and failed to act in a transparent and democratic manner. In his findings, Guy Giorno determined the council members did not violate any of the provisions. And in his final observation, he states that government decision-making affects different members of the public differently. According to the Supreme Court of Canada, public officers must retain the authority to make decisions that, where appropriate, are adverse to the different interests of certain citizens, and that in and of itself does not constitute a wrong under Canadian law. And some good news for residents of Grassy Narrows and Wabausuan First Nations suffering the effects of mercury poisoning. Effective immediately, the people in those communities who receive mercury disability payments will get more compensation for retroactively indexing their payments to inflation all the way back to when rates were frozen in 1985. The province says it also remains committed to cleaning up the contamination in the English and Robigoon River systems, with the $85 million set aside last year for remediation. The MPP for Kiiwetinoong is putting pressure on the Ford government to begin the Ring of Fire talks with the First Nations in that area. Sol Mamakwa says there have been promises made by the new premier, but no meetings scheduled so far.
On July 9th, 2018, the Matawa chiefs sent a welcoming letter to the premier asking to re-engage the vital regional negotiations necessary in order to set up the Ring of Fire. The Premier's office wrote the chiefs to say that the Minister of Indigenous Affairs would follow up. That was on August 9th, yet no meetings have been scheduled. The historic regional framing agreement for the Ring of Fire has stalled because the government hasn't engaged with the Matawa chiefs since this election.
The Minister of Indigenous Affairs, Minister of Energy, Minister of Northern Development and Mines, it takes his duty to consult very seriously, and he will continue to build those relationships with Indigenous communities, municipalities, to build lasting partnerships. My ministry has been tasked with developing resource sharing with communities across this province. We are working towards that. We are going to be partners in this communities, with Indigenous communities, with Northern Ontario, with rural communities. Ontario is open for business under the government of Doug Ford.
Federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh made a stop in Thunder Bay last weekend and had a closed-door meeting with Anishinaabe Aski Nation Grand Chief Alvin Fiddler. The pair held a news conference afterwards to disclose some of the topics they discussed. Singh says education, healthcare, housing, and infrastructure were among topics of conversation. They also discussed the topic of youth suicide in Indigenous communities and what needs to be done to prevent these tragedies from continuing.
It's funding childcare, funding education, funding access to healthcare. When these things are built up and there's a bright future and there's hope, that's how you eradicate some of the despair and the tragedy and trauma that leads to these horrible incidents. There's a cost to complacency. If we're complacent, the cost is children lose their lives and lose their future.
Fiddler adds there are several factors that go into improving the quality of life for youth.
We talk about trying to improve quality of life for our children. You have to talk about housing. You have to talk about the access to a quality healthcare system, to a quality education system, a child welfare system that is more responsive to the families, the communities, all those things.
Both leaders felt the meeting was a step in the right direction, and they say they intend to meet again in the near future. In less than a decade, some students attending two schools in Nipigon will be able to afford the cost of tuition at Lakehead University. On Monday, a memorandum of understanding between the university and the North Shore's two school boards was signed, paving the way for increased student success. Adam Riley was there and files this report.
There's been a steady increase over the years in the cost of attending post-secondary institutions. But a new deal between Lakehead University and two school boards along the North Shore, Superior Greenstone and Superior Catholic, is looking to knock those costs down for eligible students. The Achievement Program was launched in 2011 and on Monday was expanded to students at two Nipigon schools, George O'Neill and St. Edward. LU President Moira McPherson says starting in grade 4, students enrolled in the program can earn money by completing specific requirements at their school, in the community, and at Lakehead.
Those funds build so that the student and the family, as they continue through the program leading up to university age, there's enough funds in there to help them in those early years of their entry into the university.
McPherson says students in Thunder Bay who started the program in 2011 are now in grade 12 and almost ready to make the leap into university. Superior Catholic Interim Director Maria Vassanelli says the Achievement Program allows for more equity and fairness to students. She adds it's taken some time to build this deal.
It's been about 6 months or so that this has been the works. We've been working very diligently with Lakehead and our senior team to make this happen. So we're really happy also to be doing this with our co-terminus board, the Greenstone board, because we're all in this together.
Nicole Morden-Cormier is the Interim Director of Education with the Superior Greenstone Board. She says the agreement fits perfectly into her board's strategic plan.
We know that when students feel a strong sense of belonging, they are more likely to succeed. For us, the fact that students are going to be able to go and visit the campus at Lakehead University means to me that they will begin to feel comfortable in that environment.
Adam Riley, TBT News.
Coming up after the break, we continue our coverage of mayoral candidates across the region with a stop in Schreiber. Times have been tough in Schreiber over the past few years, with the town struggling to get a handle on its finances and attract new blood to the community. The residents will soon have their say in the municipal election, choosing one of two people to lead Schreiber for the next 4 years. Ryan Manazzo has his candidate profile.
There's a vacancy to be filled this upcoming election in the mayor's chair in Schreiber after the departure of Mark Figliamini. And Councillor Dave Hamilton feels he's ready to step into the role. He says bringing the town's finances under control was a challenge over the last 4 years, but he feels strides have been made, allowing for investment into the community.
We forayed into trying to improve our community by getting funding to revitalize our town and our highway corridor. In order to attract people to our community, we felt we first need to get them to stop. We're right on Highway 17.
And while some stability has come to Schreiber, Hamilton knows there are challenges that lie ahead.
The biggest hurdle, I suppose, is going to be to try and attract new businesses while maintaining what small businesses we do have in the community. And it's going to be a hard time.
Going up against Hamilton is returning Scriberian Dominic Camiso, who after a 36-year absence wants to come back and improve his childhood home. He says there's division within the community, and he hopes to bring those groups and council together again.
The volunteers is a big issue. There's a lot of hard feelings with the volunteers. There's a lot of hard feelings with things that have happened up at Walker's Lake, and I understand most of that. There's some hard feelings about the $100,000 over budget on the water tower, and I also understand that. So there's a lot of uphill battles to be fought here.
A small business owner, Camiso says if elected, he'll start a new business in the community. He also wants to turn Schreiber into a hub for either education or medical technology by partnering with regional universities or by enticing private career colleges to the town.
We can do something in the way of, say, welding, pipe fitter, machinists, things that they need in the mill to keep it going, to keep it sustained. We need to have people in town who are able to teach all of those. When I talk about medical tech, I'm not talking about a hospital. I'm talking about medical aesthetics, for example. Somebody who has diabetes, who has to travel to Thunder Bay to get service because they can't get in Terrace Bay. And I think that would be the hub for us.
Schreiber residents, like the rest of the province, will head to the polls on October 22nd. Ryan Benazzo, TBT News.
A cloud of sadness and loss hangs over the town of Schreiber this week. Flags at the town hall and around the community are at half-mast to honor the passing of longtime Schreiber politician Bob Krause, who lost a lengthy battle with cancer at the age of 83. Krause spent over a quarter of a century in local politics, first as a councillor for 14 years before taking the helm as mayor for another 12. Friend and colleague Mayor Mark Figliomini says he was shaken when he received word of Krause's passing, calling him his special mentor.
He was everything in Northwestern Ontario politics, and in Schreiber, he was just that. He was Mr. Schreiber. He was the mayor of Schreiber for so many years, and I always joked with him as he was always the mayor of Schreiber and will always be the mayor of Schreiber. Me personally, I lost one of my best friends.
Figliomini says one of Krause's last projects, the town's new water tower, will be named the Bob Krause Water Storage in his memory. As a decision awaits on who will build a new power line from Thunder Bay to Wawa, Hydro One continues to meet with communities along the route. The utility submitted a bid to the Ontario Energy Board earlier this year to construct its Lake Superior Link project. And Wednesday, they were seeking input from Shunya residents. The OEB will soon decide whether the 400-kilometer line will be built by Hydro One or NextBridge. In the meantime, Hydro One is researching a new alternative route through the Shunya and Dorian areas based on feedback on their original plans. The new route wouldn't go directly through either municipality, but would run parallel to the existing east-west transmission line. Hydro One officials feel they have the best proposal compared to the competing bid from NextBridge.
One of the advantages of our proposal is that it saves all electricity customers over $100 million in the initial build and over $30 million every year in maintenance costs. And once this gets constructed, it's going to allow for a lot of exciting projects to come of that.
The first project was coming right through our back lane, basically, and across the lake, and we've already got a pipeline going through just down up the road from us, and then we have the other hydro line running across. So one more would be quite damaging to our, recreational area.
Meanwhile, Dorian Mayor Ed Chambers and Red Rock Indian Band Chief Matt Dupuis released a joint statement this week calling on the province to reject the Hydro One bid. They want the Ford government to step in and award the contract to NextBridge now so that construction work can begin on schedule this fall. The Ontario Energy Board is hosting joint hearings on the two proposals starting Tuesday in Toronto. Kids from across the region recently took part in a conference hosted by Eco Superior. The three-day event taught students about climate change and motivated them to explore the topic and put that knowledge to good use in their communities. Corey Nordstrom has more.
120 students from across northwestern Ontario gathered at Fort William Historical Park for an event centered around youth taking charge against climate change. The kids listened to guest speakers who encouraged their determination in being more eco-friendly. Over the three-day Youth Agents of Change conference put on by Eco Superior, the students from grades 6 to 10 are tasked with creating a climate change action plan, from river cleanups to more efficient recycling that they can then bring back to their home community.
We're hoping that, of course, they help to implement the program into their school, but then it gets trickled into their community as well and brought home to parents or other members of their community.
The kids go through a number of activities based around their action plan, from brainstorming ways of implementation to how to communicate the plan on a wider scale. As the kids spend days together, they become acquainted with students from other schools and realize that these are issues that affect people wherever you're from.
The importance of having a conference at this age with this volume of students from around the region shows that they're not just islands, that they're all connected.
It's like kind of like a big community, and like lots of people are going to be seeing what we're doing and maybe contribute.
For the kids taking part in the 3-day conference, one thing is for certain. They came because they know change is needed.
If us younger kids know that what is happening and what other people did wrong, we would not do it again when we grow older.
I want to learn something new, and I was interested in, and I want my next generations to have a nice world. We have to live in it, so we have to make it nice.
Corey Nordstrom, TBT News.
The fall season may be here, but fire season is still upon us. Details on the effects of the summer forest fires had on the north and a new construction project at Dryden's Fire Management Center are coming up after the break. This week marks the beginning of the fall season, and while there are fewer than 10 forest fires burning across the region, there is still a lot of activity taking place at the Dryden Fire Center. The facility serves as one of the main hubs for firefighting operations in the Northwest and is the site of a multi-million-dollar upgrade which aims to improve response and efficiency in the years to come. Adam Riley has the details.
The weather might be getting cooler and the leaves may be changing color, but the forest fire season continues. 2018 was an extremely intense year with much of northern Ontario feeling the effects. However, things have tapered off throughout much of the region, according to Fire Information Officer Chris Marchand. But he is warning residents to be cautious while burning.
We've had significant rainfall that has alleviated a lot of the weather indices that we use to create the forest fire hazard. Those conditions change and revolve constantly, so the public should be very conscientious and diligent around making sure their campfires are well managed and taken care of, as well as people who need to burn brush and debris.
As of September 28th, there have been 839 fires across the Northwest, which have burned over 200,000 hectares of forest. Marchand says some of the hardest hit areas were the provincial parks, including Wabakimi, Quetico, and Woodland Caribou, which saw over 50,000 hectares burned. But according to Marchand, that's not a bad thing.
These fires are playing a real beneficial role in forest renewal and regeneration in those areas. There's a lot of storm and insect damage across the landscape, and forest fires do a good job of cleaning up those volatile forest fuels.
While operations may be winding down, there is still plenty of activity at the Dryden Fire Management Centre, as construction of one of the few projects given the go-ahead despite the provincial government's audit of spending projects. Response and Operations Manager Dan Cleveley says it's part of a $33 million upgrade, which will be rolled out in 3 phases.
What you see behind me here right now is phase 1, where we're building a brand new building. It's about 4,000 square feet, and we're calling it the Logistics and Service Building. And the intent is to get that building up before Christmas or shortly thereafter. And then what we will be doing is starting to move people out of the main building into there, while we then move on to demolition and revitalization of the main building.
Cleveley says the exterior of the main building will remain as is, but the interiors will be gutted and upgraded to be more energy efficient. He adds the response to fires out of Dryden will not be affected by the renovations, which are expected to be complete by 2021. Adam Riley, TBT News.
There are going to be some noticeable changes happening along Red Rock's downtown area. Initially, the local LCBO outlet was going to be temporarily closed so crews could do some repairing of the issues of the building. However, after another assessment of the work, the building has been condemned and will be demolished. Earlier this month, the town decided to look into having the former CIBC building adjacent to the LCBO torn down as well. Mayor Gary Nelson says, unfortunately, the cost to demolish the building came in too high, but he says they will find alternative uses for the building.
So it has to come down. But if need be for the cost of taking it down right now, we can't afford that, what they want to do for doing it. We'll paint it up and maybe do some advertising out of the windows or whatever, but until we can find the money to take it down.
Nelson says for the last 3 years, there has been no heat in the building and the floors are cracked, meaning the town is unable to use the building for any of its operations. That wraps up this edition of Northwest Newsweek. Thanks for watching and take care.